Good morning and welcome to the June 13th, 2026 meeting of the Coalition of Little Rock Neighborhoods. We are in the Hinton Center in a different room, 207. We are recording this. We are live streaming this on our Facebook page at CLRN.AR. And by tomorrow, we will have the YouTube recording link posted on that same Facebook page at CLRN.AR. So for our absent friends, we know we have some today committed elsewhere. This is the way you can catch up on the information that we'll be sharing today. We've invited the media. Some has attended. We welcome them. I'm Kathy Wells. I'm president of the Coalition of Neighborhoods. I come from the Downtown Association, and we'd like to now go around the table and have you introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Minister Taggins of Plainview Baptist Church, and I've been informed my Hispanic community about what's going on.
Denise Leeson, I live in Ward 1.
Norman Hodges, Ward 3, Homes Neighborhood Association.
Brooke Butler from Advocacy Alliance.
Speak up, please.
Brooke Butler, Advocacy Alliance.
We're trying to overcome the acoustic problems in the room.
Rick Weaver, Ward 1.
Kanita Grizzle, Director of Communications and Community Engagement at LR Wastewater Reclamation Authority.
Mary with the Arkansas Democratic Center.
Say that again louder. I didn't hear it.
I'm Mary with the Arkansas Democratic Center.
Welcome.
Celia Bernheimer, mostly with Pax Christi, but also Indivisible and protest organizer.
Stark, lived in a retiree, lived downtown.
Mary Henthorne, Ward 4.
Ryan Benefield, the LR Wastewater Reclamation Authority.
Welcome. We have also Channel 11 in the room. Welcome. Let me give one useful piece of information and then we'll get on with our speaker. We were able to get an official calculation on exactly how much revenue is supposed to be generating out of the Google Center coming to the port. And it amounts to $2,849,000 for the Pulaski district a year in property millage. And it amounts to total city revenues distributed amongst all the departments of $1.8 million. So the first building that opens, that's when we start collecting this money. There's also a $300,000 enrichment payment that will come from Google to the city the day building 1 opens. That's to be spent in a couple of varieties of ways by the city on missions that support Google. They're interested, as you might expect, in educating folks about the world of data and digital information, and students coming along learning about that world and becoming employees in that world. We also have had a chance to speak to them in a meeting. I went to a secret meeting this week and I posted all about it. You're on my network, you saw it. Where we were able to tell them things that we thought was important to learn. And one of the fruits of that was a very exciting new development that Ryan Benefield, the Chief Operating Officer of our sewer utility, is going to be telling us about today. We have been hearing about the 4 million gallons of drinking water that might be used for cooling the servers in this new Google Center. It turns out there's technology we learned recently whereby treated sewage effluent could be used instead going to a closed pipe system to chill these servers and remove the heat. And they're going to be building a pipeline from the center to a sewer pond anyway. So the question is, what about sending another pipeline back to the center for using that effluent in this system and saving our drinking water for drinking water? And we have a couple of other developments. We got the contracts that were in the memorandum signed today. The Google authorities purchased the property back in 25, and we've been interested in what that meant. You had research to do in one of those contracts, and you had some analysis in another of those contracts. So this is basically delving quite deeply into that particular feature data centers today. I'd like to pause at this moment and welcome our newcomers. Do sign in twice. The city keeps one of those sheets. Do have some refreshments. We've got water and coffee and nibbles. And tell us your name, because we're going around the room signing names. Tell us your name.
My name's Kathy Vaughn. I'm an oncology nurse at UMS. Nice to see you all here today.
Welcome.
I'm Sally Fixsizer, and I'm kind of with the age-friendly. I work for the Mayor's Commission on Age-Friendly Little Rock.
Welcome.
I'm hoping to get our group behind this, but we're not yet, so I'm here as just a person.
Well, welcome. And if you want to be added to my email list, make sure that your email is very clearly listed, and then I will do that.
Thank you.
And, sir, welcome. We are recording this, we are live streaming this, and we will post the recording on YouTube for your information. Welcome, take a seat. I think with that, Mr. Benefield, the field is yours. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Kathy. So yeah, just thank y'all for giving me the opportunity to come talk to y'all. Kathy and I think started talking about this in early May, actually. I know things have gotten a little, more out there lately, but this has been on the books for some time to come talk to you. Second time I've gotten to come talk to you. You remember the last time we were working on our rate study, I think about a year ago. So always good to get more information out. So yeah, what I'm going to do is just give you some basics on what Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority has been doing related to the data center, and then hopefully answer any questions you have. A couple of caveats before we get going. I'm a wastewater guy. I don't deal in power, and I don't deal in gas use, and only a little bit on the water side. So really, I'm going to be limited to questions related to wastewater related to the data center. I know there's a lot of questions regarding other utilities, and I don't want to disappoint you up front, but I can answer questions regarding those other items. The other one is Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority's involvement has only been on the one in the port. We've now announced Google facility in the port. The one in South Pulaski County, Abayo, I think, we have not been involved in. As you would imagine, as the Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority, we only deal with things inside the city limits. The Abayo facility will be outside in the county and not served by our utility. They'll have to come with their own wastewater, at that site, treatment at that site. So just to delve into it, when we were first approached in 2024 regarding a data center that could send significant quantities of wastewater to the utility, we had some of the same concerns that y'all are expressing now. And I'll tell you what those are. One is it's in grand scheme, it's not a lot of water for us, but it is a lot of water coming from one industry. And unique to a data center is, and this is going to sound odd, it's clean water compared to our normal wastewater. Low strength, we would call it. And that's unique that you would say, well, why is that a problem, right? Low strength should be good, better. Not always for us. So our treatment process relies on our process. And if you were at the rate study when I presented on it, we go through a biological process. We use microorganisms to clean wastewater, and they need food. And this wastewater does not have food in it that are bugs-like. So we looked at it for several things. The other thing is a data center wants to keep bugs from growing in their water. So they're using chemicals to make sure we don't get biological growth. So you can see our first concern was a large amount of clean water that doesn't have things for our microorganisms that also may have chemicals in it that are intended to prohibit that growth. So we started working with this facility and looking at it and saying, hey, we need to know a little bit more about our plant's ability to treat this flow before we can commit to taking what could be larger amounts. Now, quantities of flow, this is where things get really confusing. Anytime you hear, say, CAW say 4 million gallons per day, we're only going to get back a third of that. So the way this process works, you imagine they're using water to cool things. You're going to get a lot of steam, a lot of evaporation. So what we're going to get back, so if CAW is saying 4 million gallons, we think we're going to get 1.2 million gallons or so, 1.3 million gallons. If they're saying 1 million gallons per day, we're looking at 300,000 gallons coming back to us. And so the quantities, we are looking at the same quantities as some of the other utilities because we only get what comes back. The other thing too about the wastewater is it's CAW water where you've evaporated it down and maybe they've added a chemical to prohibit growth. There's nothing else added. That's what we're looking at, right? It's a limited wastewater. We understand what we're getting. So, for example, if what you're getting is a concentrated water, so CAW may have what we call total dissolved solids of, say, 50. Well, by the time you evaporate it down, we may be getting it at, let's say, 300 for total dissolved solids. 500 is the drinking water standard, so you're still looking at not that high, but that's really what we're getting is Central Arkansas water where you've evaporated down and concentrated some of the things that are in it. And luckily for us, and I think you've heard this, we have very clean water here in Little Rock. Central Arkansas water is pristine compared to water in other parts of the country. So we were looking at what we could do at our plant. Location, in this case, is very important for us. So you may not be aware, we have 3 treatment plants in the city. One out in West Little Rock, that is the newest plant that can go to 4 million gallons per day. The largest one that serves most of the city of Little Rock is the one that's between 2 runways at the airport. If you ever flew in, I hope you don't even know it's there because we're doing a good job if you don't know it's there. But that's the largest wastewater treatment plant in the state is between 2 runways at the airport. It can go to 36 million gallons per day. It's for normal flows. It can actually go to 94 million gallons per day during storm flows. And then, but the one that's important to us here today is the one we actually have in the port of Little Rock. So I was talking to Kathy the other day. I think that
Discovered we had one, I did not know.
because one's at the airport and the other's in the port. So the Port of Little Rock facility is what you'll hear us refer to our Push Creek Water Reclamation Facility. So just to give you some things about it, it is about, oh gosh, I didn't look at it a mile away from maybe where this facility is going to be, very close to where this facility is, and really located really well amongst all the industry that we have in the port. So its location and how close it's going to be to Push Creek is important. The other thing is Push Creek has a 16 million gallon per day. That's what we get on a normal day. That's what we can handle on a normal day. And we can go up to 40 million gallons per day during wet weather. So, and right now, we average on a normal day 6 to 7 million gallons per day. And so we have plenty of capacity. You can tell over 8, I'm using the term 8 to be conservative, 8 million gallons per day of available capacity right now. So even if we're looking at the 4 million gallons per day flow that at the max build out that I heard, I think the water utility is saying now, that's only an additional 1.2, 1.3 million gallons per day to a facility that has 8 million gallons per day of capacity. So, but still, even with that, we needed to know that what they're going to be sending us is going to be able to be treated at our plant and not harm our plant. Our number one obligation is always to household flows. Industry flows have to take second to household flows. So we want to make sure that our plant can take this quantity, treat it successfully, meet our ADQ permit, and be able to be discharged appropriately. So we had a treatability study done. So we hired an outside consultant to do a treatability study to look at what could we handle from the facility and be able to still meet what we need to do at the plant, protect it for other industries, our citizens, and meet our permit. So we had that study done, and what it showed is we can. That plant can handle what they're going to be able to send us, which, and I'll talk about in a minute how we know what they're going to be able to send us, or what they're going to send us. It can meet what we have up to right now without significant improvements to the plant, 3 million gallons a day. So that's kind of, if we could get up to 3 million gallons a day of wastewater, and then with a little more improvements, we actually looked at we could go 6 to 7 million gallons per day. And then we also looked at how the best way to treat this wastewater is. One of the nice things about our Push Creek plant is that we already use chlorine as a disinfectant there, similar to they're going to use in their wastewater. So we already chlorinate, and then we dechlorinate it there. So we have to treat our wastewater with chlorine, and then we have to take that chlorine back out before we put it in the Arkansas River. So that plant, unlike our other plants, which actually use UV light for disinfection, is set up really well to be able to remove any chlorine that they put into the wastewater. So several controls we put in place, though, just so you know, to make sure that what we're getting can be treated. We're requiring that they have 48 hours of storage, so we could stop flow for 48 hours. They have to have enough storage where they can hold it back. They have to send us any flow, assuming this goes forward and is constructed, in a consistent flow. They can't send us 3 million gallons per day over about 2-hour period and then nothing for the rest of the day. We want it to come to us in a slow process, so we're not getting slugged with anything, a massive amount and then nothing. And the other thing we're going to do is, as Ms. Wells said, was put a dedicated line in. So this is going to come to us through a dedicated line, not go into our normal wastewater processes. So we can handle it better at the plant, considering it doesn't have any biology in it. So just early on, we entered into some agreements with the facility that even though we did the treatability study, they paid for it. So they reimbursed us. There's been no cost related to this facility that's been incurred by the citizens of Little Rock. And that is our agreement now and the one we have going forward, that anything necessary to handle and treat their flow will be borne by the industry. And I want you to know, this isn't unusual for us. This is how we treat all industries. The citizens of Little Rock and the households. Yes.
That's a 3-year contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a 3-year contract.
That's a 3-year, for the kind of, but it would be the same thing before if we were to not deconstruct it. We would continue that same. They would have to pay for the dedicated line. If you've seen the agreement with the city of Little Rock, that's in there, that we would construct it and own it, but they would pay for it. That's actually written into that city of Little Rock agreement. But our agreement with them to date, they've paid everything to get to this point, and we'll continue to make sure that we're not putting any costs on the citizens of Little Rock. For their flow.
And we have posted all of these documents, the memorandum of understanding, and then the ones mentioned in it that he's talking about. So it's out there in detail if you want to delve into it. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know when you're ready to take questions, but it's my understanding that the discharge water from the data center is hot water. So is that a resource that could be captured and used?
So that's something that came up recently. Actually, Kathy had sent that to me as an idea that
that's in the last week.
In the last week. So normally, this is the thing. We don't allow anyone to send us water over 104 degrees. We have a standard.
It's warm.
So we don't accept hot water at our plant normally. We require anyone to cool it down before they send it to us. There is an interesting idea.
That's Fahrenheit, right?
Yes, Fahrenheit. Sorry.
Got to be taken here.
104 degrees Fahrenheit. So, but one thing we do at the Bush Creek plant that is unique is we actually we take our solids that come out of the wastewater and we treat them in what's called anaerobic digesters. So we put them in these big pressure vessels, and we have to keep that at a higher temperature. And that generates methane gas that we then use to generate electricity for the plant.
Is this like a pressure cooker in your kitchen?
A little bit, yes. It's sitting there.
I know that's
decomposing, and the methane gas, that's what's the pressure. We're capturing that methane gas for reuse. And that we have to keep that at a consistent temperature. And so right now what we do is we also use that gas to heat water ourselves in boilers, and we pump our own heated water around these digesters. So one idea that came up is would it be possible for us to maybe receive hotter water from Google, hotter than we would normally allow, which is the 104, and then use it for our digesters. That's, we haven't been able to look at that yet. That just came up last week, and we haven't been asked by Google to do that yet, but that's something we
asked them about it.
That's something
we'll see what happens.
We would look into. Yes.
And one other thing, I'm not an expert, and I think a lot of us are here because we don't even know what questions to ask. There's a manual put out by the National Nuclear Laboratory at Tri-Cities. It used to be known as the Hanford Nuclear Plant. But they have 50 years, 60 years of expertise in handling environmental impacts of the water and the power. And I found it through a news feed that was about the data centers all around. And that sounds like a very good manual. I would like to send a link to somebody.
Send it to me.
So we can be aware of it. My email is here and I wrote down your phone number.
Can you say it again, what is it called?
It's the National Nuclear Laboratories in, I think it's TC for Tri-City, but it's in for south middle Washington. And they discharge water to the Snake River and the Columbia. So they have a lot of expertise around this.
Have you come across this one?
No, but honestly, I'll just tell you that our treatability study is very specific. So that's probably general. That treatability study, which is also available to anyone upon request, goes in very specifically about how our plant can handle this material and what we need to do. So no, I think that's a good resource. But
There are other data centers.
Yeah.
And it will all be at those.
Sure. Only a couple things, and I'll go into all the questions you have on it. Is so one thing that was asked is how can we guarantee what they're going to send us? Right? I can say what we can handle. Any large industry, and this one in particular, has to have a permit from us. Just like we have a permit with ADQ, industries get a permit from us, and we regularly test their wastewater to make sure it's meeting that permit. We issued a willingness to serve, which is just a letter we issue to an industry that may be coming in the future, and it already in there says you cannot exceed these things. You have to use these chemicals. So we dictate through a pre-treatment permit what they can send us. We routinely monitor theirs, and then occasionally you'll see where if you have an industry that doesn't meet their permit, we have enforcement procedures to address that. So that's something we do for all major industries, and this would fall in a category of a major industry. You would have to get a pre-treatment permit from us that would have routine monitoring to make sure, like I mentioned, if we don't find a reason to use their heated water, they have to meet that 104. That's one of those things that's in their permit. You cannot send us water hotter than 104 degrees Fahrenheit. So the other things that
And how frequently does the client list of your utility turn up a violator? And what do you do to them when they violate?
So two things. So we usually only have maybe 1, 2 a year. We have an ability to issue a fine and corrective measures for that. Typically for, I think there's two things that go into what we do. If they violate but it doesn't have a harmful effect on the plant, it's usually more a corrective measure with a warning. If it were to have a negative effect on the plant, we can do cost recovery of anything that it were to do to the plant. So, we rely on our utilities to send us what we can handle. That's, what our plant can treat. And we're subject to violating our own permit if they don't. And we have a 13-year compliance record at First Creek right now, which is pretty significant. So no violations any month, any analyte. For 13 years, not even something minor. So we're very protective of our plants. I think Adamfield's at 16 years now without a violation of any effluent. So you can tell that is our highest priority, is to make sure what we send out to the Arkansas River 100% complies with our permit. And we're going to make sure no one, including any industry, hurts our ability to meet that.
Talk to us a little bit about sending your effluent back to the data centers. This is the first one, so my guess is your utility has zero experience doing that. But as an industry, you've seen this coming. Presumably your professional staff has some ability to grapple with it. So tell us how that might work.
Sure. So first thing is, this is something this is in our plan. We're not called Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority for no reason. Our goal is to reclaim our water, and not just reclaim it to put it into the Arkansas River, which is cleaner than the Arkansas River in most cases. But still, it's our goal to be able to reuse it. I will tell you, and in my previous career at the state of Arkansas, I can speak to this also. This isn't done in Arkansas yet, really, on any scale, other than ourselves. We reuse our own water all the time at the plant, but it's not done across the entire state, actually, except for in some areas maybe more related to agriculture. And so this is pretty new, but we've been working on this for some time. It was just reported, I think, we just presented on the Clinton School of Public Policy survey and focus groups we did. And City of Little Rock residents are overwhelmingly favorable for us to reuse our water for things like irrigation and industrial use. Not potable, We're not, even some areas of the country, are putting their water back in for potable. We're only looking at what we call non-potable, non-human use. But no, we just did that, and we're very interested in it. We haven't been asked yet, but our water, particularly coming from these plants, could be reused. We would have to get approval from the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, the Department of Health, and the Arkansas Natural Resources Division of the Department of Agriculture, actually, to be able to do it. But yeah, we put out very high quality water that we're currently looking even at ways that we can send it for reuse if requested. Like I said, to date, we haven't been requested for reused water for the data center.
That's very new. Let's pause. We need to adjust the chairs so everybody can have a seat. I think if you maybe walked around, you could get right here by us. We don't want to knock over the camera there. Come on.
With this one right here tomorrow.
Well, I just want everybody to get the chair. Thank you.
Ms. Kathy, do you want me to just put the chairs right here so they can?
Oh, why don't you just, toss it over, more or less. Make them available. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Good plan.
But I'm really, at this point, any questions?
Have you had a chance to find out what other data centers are doing in this since we talked? I know it's just 2 days ago.
Sure.
But they tell us that their West Memphis plant, Google is building right now, it's a few months ahead of this operation in Little Rock, uses that method. So I would hope that's close enough they could provide information.
Sure. No, we haven't been. I only know anecdotally what's been actually reported out widely that West Memphis facility is planning on using reclaimed water from their wastewater treatment plant. And then also I've read, like I said, really just in the paper that the Conway, if it were to go forward, is looking at using reclaimed water. We actually have, if you've heard CAW report, lots of good, clean, potable water. I think they may be a little more restricted in those two communities. But yeah, I think they are, but that, today, those haven't actually been done yet, right? West Memphis is being constructed, but they won't start using reclaimed water and what that would look like until they're actually up and running. And that would be a pattern we could use to see how their permit with DEQ is written, what's required to reuse their water.
You'll be their first visitor when they pull the switch.
We will be looking at that because not only, even if this data center doesn't use water, we think in the future our water, especially the level we're required to treat it to, is going to be very useful for industries or other irrigation use in either the airport area or the port area in the future. So we're really excited about the state. And once again, this isn't something that Little Rock is behind on. The entire state, because we are considered water rich, historically, has not really done a lot of water reuse in our entire state. So,
I'm going to read this. Cooling systems, semiconductors, and fire suppressants used by data
You're going to have to talk louder for our recording here.
Cooling systems, semiconductors, and fire suppressants used by data centers are all possible sources of PFAS. I know that from having read various things that not all water reclamation places test for PFASs. What will you do if you find PFAS in the chemicals that come out of the Google Center?
So let me say it a different way. Our goal with PFAS is source control, meaning eliminating it from ever being used so that you can get to it. So two things. One is that obviously if they were, we would put into the pre-treatment permit there cannot be any use of PFAS. So there would eliminate the opportunity to get into our system. Also, we would, if we ever found PFAS in any industry, we would restrict it from coming to our plant. So yeah, we don't view, currently, and kind of like I mentioned, the only thing that should be in the water that they're sending us from this cooling water is Central Arkansas water, and in those few small chemicals that we'll regulate to prevent, bacterial growth. Yeah, so if you've seen our willingness to serve letter.
Yeah, but I'm not a chemical person.
No.
So I look at them, I say,
Yes, but the thing that I can tell you is that treatability study backs up that entire list, right? We took that list and we ran it through that treatability study, and through that permitting process would restrict what they can and can't use, particularly in this cooling water. They'll also have another stream that will go into our normal, which would be their bathrooms and that sort of thing, which have a different requirement.
And another question, and I can't remember the term. If they reuse and reuse the same water.
You mean recirculate? It seems to be what they say is not
I think there's a term.
the chiller pipe once, but up to 8 times.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously concentrates all the nasty stuff.
It does, and that's what I was mentioning earlier, though. So yeah, they do. That's why, but Arkansas, the nice thing, Central Arkansas water is so clean to begin with. That's what we've been doing, and that's what we did the treatability study on. So let's say that we have such low total dissolved solids now. What they give back to us will be higher concentration of those things, but still not at a level that we can't successfully treat. And as I mentioned, TDS, total dissolved solids, what we would get would still be below what the drinking water standard is of 500. Even though what you're getting with CAW is so much better water,
Yeah.
It might be at 50. I don't know what CAW's TDS levels are. I know what our treatment capacity would be. Yeah,
So
but it is
they are going to
concentrated.
be, I can't remember that
Yes.
term.
Yeah, that's why.
Recycling the water over and over again.
Yeah, that's how we get from, say, a max build out of 4 million gallons a day, and all I'm going to get is 1.25, because you're going to reuse that water until such time as they need to flush that out and put new water in. So yeah, they're going to reuse that water multiple times before they deem it wastewater and send it to us.
And there is this feature that because they're going to run a particular gallon of water through the chiller system, it has to go through a cooling tower because it comes out hot, of course. Its function is to take heat off the servers. So you don't run it right back through, it's too hot. So you're going to have to use a cooling tower. And one of the things that I was able to find was an Environmental Protection Agency guide on this that I posted, which talks about the fact that you basically use old familiar patterns. You run it up to the top of the tower and you let it flow down through a honeycomb of exposing it to the air so it cools back down. You suck it out the bottom and you recycle it again. And you do it and you do it and you do it. So you also have the potential not only of concentration, but you have the potential of what they call blowdown and drift. Well, obviously, if it's a windy day, this is an open air facility. That would be the question that we would also like you to address about how would you confine this tower mist and drift.
And so that would definitely be not a wastewater question I can answer, because we're only, what I can handle is what comes to us. They'll have, I believe, they'll have maybe an air permit that might cover something like that, and it definitely would be, that's an on-site issue. We would only be, and their ADQ stormwater permit would definitely have to cover that. But that's not something we deal with. We only deal in wastewater.
Who would be responsible for that?
You just said
Yeah, I
Department
think,
of Environmental
I
Quality.
believe the Department of
permitting
Environmental would permit that.
Quick question. I've heard about PFAS. Can you explain what it is and why you all, I've heard some people say that they will have it in their drinking water, just like in the sewer water. So can you explain a little bit what that is and why you all do not let the industry put it into the system?
Sure. So, gosh, and I'm definitely not a chemist expert on PFAS, but I'll tell you, PFAS, PFOA, PFAS, it's all these group of chemicals that we've created that are used in several different sources, and they're called forever chemicals. Sometimes we'll hear them called that because they're very, very difficult to treat. So that's the issue, is that while we don't want them at our treatment plant, is because they're very, very difficult and expensive to treat. And luckily, Little Rock has not had any industrial sources of PFAS, PFOA that we've identified. Because, like I said, they're very local, they come in very small concentrations, and then are very expensive to treat. And so we don't want it in our wastewater, nor do we want it in our treatment sludge that we're treating and then reusing as a soil amendment. So that's why, and because they're so difficult to treat at a treatment plant, that's why source control of these chemicals has become so important. You want to eliminate them from any source. And from my understanding, and CAW would answer this question, I don't believe we have any PFAS people have found any of that in our drinking water. And then, as I mentioned, so if they're not in the drinking water, they should not be in this wastewater. So.
Will you all be testing for that on a regular basis?
No, how we handle it is we restrict it on the front end. We don't allow it on the front end.
We have asked Central Arkansas water that question. The answer is they got none and they test for it. So they're keeping it out too. Yes, sir.
So I have some questions about just transparency and governance of the program. So would you mind explaining a little bit? It's my understanding that what you've been discussing today and telling us about what your plans are is all falling within the ordinances and regulations that are currently on the books, and that there hasn't been a need to change them. You're able to provide this level of regulation and this, with what we already have. Is that true?
That's true.
So my question then becomes, under what conditions would you need to change ordinance or regulation, and which agency would have jurisdiction over that? So for example, if you find that they're not doing what they need to do, does this fall under City of Little Rock ordinance and the $500 a day fine, or is it under some other jurisdiction? Like, who's in charge of this?
Sure, and I would say that's a multi-step answer. So we have our standard City of Little Rock sewer ordinance, which is different than what the other ordinances. And it clearly states what we're required to do under our pre-treatment program and what industry is required to do. And then that is regulated, we're regulated under that by ADEQ. So it's both a city to have a city regulatory framework to come into our city. That's something that's triggered as soon as we hit 5 million gallons per day, which was probably in the, as soon as the Clean Water Act came into effect, Little Rock hit that. So it is a city, or our standard pretreatment ordinance, regulated.
Is this concern that we are being very reactive?
We've committed to, for example, we've only committed to taking 300,000 gallons per day from this center. But we did our study all, so what is our max capacity to take flow? And it was 6 to 7 million gallons per day. So I just want you to, so we looked at it with this holistic approach, not looking at one data center, and not committing to anything more than 300,000 gallons until we could verify that our treatment plant could handle it, and what ultimately we could handle. So I think in this regard, the Clean Water Act and our pretreatment program is fully able to handle this. We don't announce when we tell an industry that we can't take their flows. That's not something you'll see in the paper that Little Rock, but we work with every industry that might come into that has come into the city or might come into the city to look at, can what they need to send us, can we handle it at the treatment plants? And I think that's worked very successfully for our plants. So I don't think in this regard, from a wastewater standpoint, I think we have all the authorities we need to handle the flow, and if we couldn't handle the flow, to say no, we cannot take on this flow.
And is the oversight for your agency specifically the City of Little Rock, or is there an independent commission?
So we have a commission that, and the members of that commission are appointed by the city board.
It's the same thing, is it one of those quasi-legal daughter corporations in operation? But let me just ask the obvious question. We have been told this becoming $1 billion facility is expected to be one of 5. In fact, when the Chamber of Commerce calculated the revenues coming from this, they gave us a sheet for 1 million, one center, the first and then they said a complete build out would be 5 of these centers. So do we just multiply what you said by 5?
So what we understand is, and what we've committed to is 300,000 gallons per day is what's anticipated from the first building. So we looked at that. Now you're looking at that. That's the difference between that 1 million gallons per day of drinking water to 4 million that we keep hearing as the rate. 4 million is total build out, which means I get 1.25, 1.3 million gallons per day of wastewater. 1 million is maybe that first construction, which is that 300,000-ish that wastewater. So with that entire 5 buildings is that big number you're hearing, that's not a multiplication of that big number, if that makes sense.
But what about the size of the sewer pipe?
So
You're gonna build a pipe that takes you 300,000 and you're gonna build 5 more or 4 more?
no, we would size the pipe that they're gonna pay for, that's an independent pipe, for maximum build out of the plant. Now, as anything, if they never build more than 1 building, then it would only take that flow from 1 building. If they build 2 buildings, it would take the flow from 2 buildings. But yeah, we always size our pipes for maximum flow.
That they're paying for.
Yeah, that's in the city agreement. You can read the city agreement and our reimbursement agreement.
I'd like just clarification back, we're talking about forever chemicals. You said that it's tested before going, so you don't test. How do we know that this center complex isn't going to produce some of those forever chemicals and then cut out for you? You're not testing that continues to go on.
So what we would do is control the source, not allow them to utilize that as a chemical. And there's no use of, my understanding of PFAS in the cooling water itself.
Well, if you're not testing, how you know?
So yeah, they're not going to, because we're going to put in their permit that they're not allowed to utilize those.
And you just trust them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it this way: the PFAS is one chemical, but honestly, this could be said of thousands of other chemicals that we're going to say they can't use, right? So PFAS is one chemical, but there's lots of other things that they would be restricted from using.
You say you're telling them they can't use it. What we want to know is how are you going to know that they're not using it if you're not testing the water coming from them to you?
Yeah, what I would say that would be the same as why they're not using. There's dozens of other chemicals that they can't use, hundreds of other chemicals they can't use. It would be in the same category as that, and there would be no need to use it in cooling water blowdown. Right? There's no PFAS use for cooling water blowdown.
Yeah, but do you know, should we know whether that stuff can be produced there and then come through the water to you? You mean, starting out in some other form and then getting shredded some tiny micro
I think someone had said that PFAS can end up in some of these wastewaters, right? Did you mention that? Or somebody mentioned that. So she's just asking you, if it's produced, how do you know that it's not in that water?
So yeah, and what we're saying that is the way it can get in there is if they have that, they utilize that chemical at the facility, right? If they're not utilizing that chemical at the facility, it cannot get in there at all. So the source control, not using the chemical, and this isn't a chemical that you're going to have, one little vial of it over here, right? The use of it in data centers, my understanding is for fire. It's the firefighting purpose of that chemical, right?
It doesn't touch the water.
So yeah, it's not part of the cooling water.
Okay.
And we wouldn't want it used for any water because, it'd have to be contained and we wouldn't allow it discharged to our system.
So what are the monitoring processes or procedures, protocols for the restricted chemicals in general?
So one of the things we do when they first send us wastewater, and we could, at any time the permit is what we call a priority pollutant scan. That scans for a lot of different chemicals. I'm not sure if PFAS is in that list yet. That's a federal Clean Water Act list, and we look for anything in that priority pollutant scan that we might not normally expect to see in the wastewater.
How often is it done?
That's definitely done at the very first startup, and again when their permit is renewed, and I have to get that date on how often those permits get renewed.
You had a question?
Yes, my question was basically the same as hers. Is there some sort of inspection process? Because that's what I've had to go through for years in the profession I'm in, you get inspected. Right. They don't take our word for stuff.
No, we do. We do. And I mentioned that earlier. Any of these large industries have a permit from us. We inspect, we sample for what we known contaminants that at what levels. We'll issue a permit that says you can't send us anything more than this. And we have a full pretreatment staff and program that analyzes that to make sure that what we're getting is what is under their permit. Similar to as AEQ does to us, right? We do the same for our industries.
Are you honestly going to believe them when they say they will use something like PFAS? To me,
But remember, the condition for violation, if he ever discovers that they've done it, is they can shut them down. And they can certainly charge them the expensive price of cleaning up.
But Kathy, we're not hearing that testing or that checking on it is happening. That's the concern.
Yes.
So the concern, we agree with what you're saying, Kathy, valid point, but we're not hearing trust to verify, we're just hearing the trust part. So that's what, I think that's what we keep.
We all
working
know
toward.
we don't trust. I mean, it's hard to trust, right? That's part of
And
it.
you're saying you took the permit, but when are you going to test again? 3 years?
Oh, no. We do a priority pollutant scan, so we're looking for, this large list of chemicals to see if we're finding anything at the beginning. But we do, I think it's quarterly testing of their wastewater to make sure they're meeting the permit requirements. Yes, yeah.
but if PFAS is and other, we will never know.
So like I said, the focus on PFAS is definitely eliminating it from even being something on site, right? Not having it as a potential to get into the wastewater. And PFAS is one of those chemicals that, like I said, firefighting foam, as long as they're not using it as a firefighting foam, then it should not be on site at all. And then second is, it should be used on site.
I understand it's in cooling systems and semiconductors.
Would be CAW drinking water and those, biological inhibitors that they put in that we regulate on what to keep biological growth from occurring, maybe corrosive inhibitor. There would be no use for it in cooling water. Now, it could be, since Central Arkansas Water doesn't have it in their drinking water, then it should not be in cooling water low down. And I would say this would be true of any industry in the city, right? It's the same process for any industry we have in the city. If they're not utilizing on the facility, there should be no pathway to get into the
So it
wastewater.
has to be a federal government policy to test for it before you will.
Obviously, if we were required under the Clean Water Act to test for it, we would. But I think all the focus nationwide is on source control, getting it out of our source completely. Because like I said, the cost of treating for these chemicals is not something that our rates would be way higher, right? We could not. The cost of treating for these chemicals is very extensive. Anywhere in the system, not.
I think we're all still paying a small surcharge on our water bill for upgrades that are necessary. Stormwater runoff and sewage, I think. Is that still current?
No, that's not. I think you may be thinking. We
The
always.
old court order, is that what you're thinking about?
No, some work was done on my street recently. They're just going around the neighborhoods and replacing those sewer pipes.
We don't have Kenita, we don't have a surcharge at all. We charge one bill, which is based on what we call your average winter consumption.
Right.
We don't have any additional charges other than just your one
Really,
sewer.
my question is, I read that West Memphis has obtained some pretty substantial gifts from their Google Data Center.
Yes, $25 million.
Weatherization and
Yes.
public water facilities, and have you asked?
A lot of that was through the institutional community benefits ordinance. So
Is
it
that-
was
is that-
legally mandated. It was something that would be, it would have to be done at the political level in negotiations with the.
Well, is that in process?
Not currently.
Yes, ma'am, and Wednesday, I went to talk to Google in that secret meeting, and I asked, I was so glad they asked. I had a long list.
Uh-huh. And what was their response?
They were interested. One of the things they were very interested in was my assertion that we had the best damn water in the country, and let's not waste it in the cooling box. After I just discovered you could also use treated effluent from sewer plants in these same cooling systems.
So my
And I was
question-
speaking directly to the engineer, the civil engineer's responsibility it is to deal with water to this little
We
data
should have
center.
a plan for what's the gas.
But this is just, starting out, so we got a timely question in.
So can I ask real quick about this whole idea of using new water versus reclaimed water, whatever you want to call it? Why are they not thinking of that in the first place? Why are we having to bring that to them as the community? We understand that.
You have to ask your data center staff about why they choose one over the other, why they got a drinking water letter to serve from that water utility. That's in the memorandum of understanding at the time they purchased the property in April of 25.
Sure. But I just don't know why they would go for the good stuff first, and why not?
Very possibly because the economic development folks wooing them to come to Little Rock always brag about our wonderful water and our abundant water. And they just followed that particular line of inquiry. And a guess, total speculation.
You mentioned earlier that you might be able to use this other type of water as opposed to fresh water or recycled water. Where is that process of being looked at or studied?
It's 48 hours old.
So
when I popped with it Friday, Wednesday.
We've not been asked to look at reused water. That would be a process. It's not something we currently have available that meets ADQ requirements. So I want to stress that this is not something that we're just not, this isn't being done anywhere in the state of Arkansas that I know of, that we're using reused water. Now, I know it's planned for West Memphis, according to what I've read. It may be planned for Conway. So if we were to get the request, that any industry wanted to reuse water, we'd have to do a study to see what that looked like. We'd have to work with the state on what they would allow us to do. And so that's still a process, but to date, we haven't been asked to go through that process for any industry, for this industry particularly. We are working on some folks who might want to use ours for irrigation closer to the Little Rock Airport area, but we don't have anyone yet asking to use our reused water at the port.
But you're willing to discuss it and pursue it.
We are Water Reclamation Authority. We 100%. Nothing would make me happier to find to be able to reuse our water. We are very proud of the water we treat, how clean it is, and we believe it is perfect for people to reuse for non-potable, non-drinking water uses. We think it is ready and able to be used for those purposes.
You just answered my question.
Yes.
So when I called him up after I got out of the meeting Wednesday, I said, I want you to know we're going to ask you more questions on Saturday. He said, I'm so glad you asked. So,
hey, our name is Water Reclamation Authority. I keep saying that. Our goal is to not just return our water to the Arkansas River, which, like I said, that's a good use of it because it is cleaner in a lot of cases. But we would love to find, limited, acceptable reuse opportunities for our water from our treatment plants. Particularly the one at the airport, the one in Bush. It's a little tougher out of Little Maumelle. It's a smaller plant.
So you might look at other centers around the country. And I guess, I think, not to belabor this, but Google had lots of resources. These centers had lots of resources. I imagine they've looked at it. And if they haven't, it's interesting to know why they haven't. What is it about fresh water that's making them go to that? But going back to transparency and the Reclamation Authority, you have this commission. I think it shows 8 people, including Lance Hines. He's a non-voting member.
That's right.
They have meetings. Do they discuss this data center? Has it been in recent meetings that they've had? Topics?
Not recently, but we have discussed it with them. So we did several meetings. When we did the contract to hire the consultant that did the treatability study, we discussed it. It has come up at several meetings for their discussion. So they know what we're doing in regard to this. Now I will say we're focusing on the data center, but we work with potential or any industry that you see come to Little Rock. We worked with well in advance of them coming here because that's what we do to make sure that we don't invite an industry that we can't handle at our plant. So we are currently working with other industries that might want to come into the port, and we've worked with every industry to date. So, but yeah, they have been in the loop on what's going on with the data center.
Sure. And I appreciate that they make the high-level decisions, contracts, and all that. And I know there's a couple of representatives here. I believe Mr. Gell is with you're with the Reclamation Authority, is that
Yes.
right? Yes, and do y'all attend those board meetings, the commission meetings?
Oh, of course, yeah, I'm one of the ones sitting at the front with the board members.
Okay. They do list for the public here, they list their meeting minutes on their website if you're interested. There's a couple of months that have not been added. It goes back to February, I think, the last time you posted. So just if folks want to know, they want to take a look. So I don't know how often y'all get those meeting minutes up.
As soon as they are signed by our board secretary, generally it's behind, but if anyone, and I have cards, if anyone needs minutes or video of meetings before, I'm happy to send them to you. But we do meet all of the state requirements of posting our meetings, videos, and minutes. And we also live stream them as they're happening.
Yeah, just for transparency's sake, I think a lot of us,
In April of 25, and so this memorandum agreement was signed by all officials. That was the beginning of.
And so I know you've got a copy of it, I don't have, when we signed the reimbursement agreement with Little Bend, I think it was before the one with the city. We had already been under that agreement before the city.
The date of the purchase.
Yeah, so the date of that Willow bid, the reimbursement agreement would list when we started working on the study that we released to you.
So presumably your commission was involved with authorizing it or signing off on it. So if people wanted to track this, they would go back to minutes of at least April 25 in that body. Are they searchable on a particular word like data center?
They're not searchable, but if you have any questions, I may can help you find exactly what you're looking for. Otherwise, you just have to go for that particular month.
Month to month, and just go read it yourself.
Yes.
But it's there to read.
They're there to read, but they're approved a meeting behind. So like the February would be available at the end of March after they've been approved. So they're running a month behind. And sometimes too, depending on signatures.
yeah, the last I saw was February.
Okay.
They're 4 months.
I will double check. I will
So
see what's going on.
we have 9 meetings a year, so they're not, we don't have a bunch of, we have nine meetings, about every 6 weeks is our commission meeting. So I know there was one in May.
But there's been a lot of discussion at the data centers lately, so it'd be good to see what they're saying in those meetings. So, if they've had some since February.
Yeah, but then I'll tell you, I don't think this has been on our agenda since February for our board. They approved the work, and we had discussions when we started work with the treatability study and the agreement to do so. And they approved our consultant who did the treatability study. That's when their discussions would have been. So yeah, we were working
This is-
October of 2024.
Well, that's subsequent to April. Oh, I'm sorry, no, you're right.
Yeah.
It's before, yeah. So this comes out, and we found this magic, wonderful chemical technical list. Why don't you just tell us generally what that told you when you got it? That's a result, right?
So no, this is actually what we issued to them. So
That was your hunt, your search out list.
So what this said was, this was the willingness to serve. It's something we do for most industries that come in, is so before they construct, say, hey, we think we can accept 300,000 gallons per day under certain conditions. And I mentioned earlier, on most of those conditions, a dedicated line, equalization, storage capacity, flow metering, pretreatment permit, and we said, but in no way can anything you're sending us exceed this chart. So this said, hey, you cannot exceed this chart. Now, this is just a willingness to serve. So this is actually not even the full permit they'll have to get before they construct. But this was just establishing, even in that permit, this is going to be your limit. And this is what we used in the study to say, okay, if they don't exceed these limits here, can we treat and handle this waste? Now, we knew we could handle 300,000 gallons, which is a small amount compared, but we wanted to see at this level, how much can we treat full time? And then this agreement here references that treatability study occurring and being subject to that, and then any considerations for additional capacity or system improvements will be based on the study findings and subject to further agreements between the parties. So, and then like I said, everything we have is generally foyable and releasable under FOIA, so.
From that same document, I have a question.
Sure.
Under long-term solution, and in a minute, it is understood that the industrial discharge through the headworks is not intended as a long-term solution. The parties agreed to collaborate on an alternative long-term discharge method. The study will provide further guidance on the timeline specifics and potential options for this long-term solution, which will be subject to further agreement between parties. Long-term discharge solution options.
Sure. So that treatability study, the one you looked at, so remember earlier what I mentioned about this wastewater is it doesn't have any nutrients in it, right? It is low strength. It does not have any food, we call it, for our microorganisms.
So when you're saying options, you're still talking about doing the work. You're not, I thought maybe the options meant it won't be you, it'll be some other method of discharge.
No. It would be us, but it would mean,
Okay.
so headworks, I'm sorry, there's a lot of technical wastewater terms and all these things. And
Yeah.
it's almost impossible not to have that. Headworks means the very front of my plant. So that means where every single drop comes in. And so at the headworks, our process, and I wish I had the chart from the rate study presentation because we went through this, is first thing we do is it goes through a bar screen to take out large solids. This water's not going to have any large solids in it. There's no chance for it to get. Next thing we do is we take sand out of it. We go through a vortex. This water's not going to have sand. So what we want to do is we don't want to send this water through a treatment process that don't matter, right? That it's not going to be treated because there's none of those things in it. So what we said was we could take this small amount of the headworks, but we did that full treatability study to say what is a better option where we still treat it, it still meets our full permit, but maybe doesn't come through what we call the headworks. Yeah. Yes.
So is someone testing quarterly for that list of chemicals or something? I heard you say something about quarterly review.
Yeah. So what will happen is, and it's listed in there, so this is just a planning document. This facility, it is listed here, the project must obtain and maintain a valid pretreatment permit from the utility. Well, we can't even issue that permit until they're starting operations. Because we want to test what's coming out as part of that permit. So kind of the process, about 90 days before they start operations, they give us a notification. And then we come out and start the permitting process. And when they first start up, or should say right after, we won't accept their first water. But the very first, once they start in operations, we're going to test that water and make sure it is what we believe it to be. And then we're going to issue them a full permit that at a minimum is going to have these things in it and is likely to have other chemicals in it, in that permit to say. And then we're going to get on a routine where we're going to come out and test their water. And we do this for every industry. So please, this isn't unique to Google and it's not unique to a data center. We test what they send us to make sure that what we're getting is meeting that permit. There's some industries, I'll tell you, that we even have automatic sampling. We have a continuous read meter because they're sending us very high strength flow. And high strength flow can really, we need to be able to adjust our plant to meet high strength flow. This is low strength flow, but still, they'll get a permit to have a full list of things they have to analyze for.
Okay.
And we'll analyze for.
My next question is really not, specific to water.
You speak up for the recording.
My next question is related to SpaceX, which just went public yesterday. And Elon's plan is to have data centers in space. So what are we going to do with all these new buildings, all this, expense?
If technology leaves them behind for a new process.
Right. What are we going to, why are we doing this?
So I can't answer some of that, but I can't answer the one. I can answer the one important thing for Little Rock Water Reclamation. Our agreement with this data center and any industry is they're going to pay the upfront costs. So the sunk costs are theirs, not yours, and not me as Little Rock Water Reclamation or you as citizens of this system. Those costs are there. So if they put in a data center and they pay the upfront costs and then they are no longer in business, the citizens will actually own this asset with no, we won't owe on it, if that makes sense. So that's why they have to pay the upfront cost of treatment, and why our agreement says that. Yes.
I learned something on that I wanted to bring to your attention at this point. Finance not being my skill, I was asking a variety of that question to an expert in the field. And he reminded me that the Act 9 of 1960 bonds, which we have typically limited because it takes 2/3 of the property millage increase from school districts and others, but that's the big loser. For 30 years, it's a 30-year bond, and they don't get but a third of it. In fact, that was the calculation that we got here from the folks. And he said, well, Kathy, remember, they're going to have to pay the bondholders. Now, we all know one of the real fixed assertions in this nation is you've got to pay your bonds, and they will collect if you don't. So if, for some technical reason, what they're doing at this particular plant, with this particular operation, is obsolete and no longer going to be done by them, they're going to hustle up some other replacement to use as much of this as they can, because every month they owe the bonds, and they do it for 30 years, and that's on data center, that's on the Google. So we have some assurance he won't be left with a vacant building rotting into the ground, because they've got to pay for it, which means they want somebody in there generating revenue they can use to pay for it. I thought that was a bit comforting myself.
Yeah.
I just seen other big empty buildings go to waste, you know.
We have seen
That's
it.
a big, you're talking about a big, huge.
We have seen them, but this is a protection against that. Not saying it's going to be absolute, but it's something that officials in the community are looking to. And I'd like to welcome Director Virgil Miller, who's with us. Director Virgil Miller, what can you say about this city ordinance governing data centers and how well they're going to be protected?
What I need to well, I can say this. I think this means great. This is part of the public process to get more information out. When we, the city board, I can speak for myself, was presented with this opportunity in April of last year that we would be able to have this big company come in, $1 billion company in economic development. It was presented to us, and it sounded great. Everybody signed off on it. Of course, the devil's in the details, and once we begin to find out more and more about what we had agreed to, we started asking more and more questions. When we were faced with Act 851 of 2023, the Data Center Act from the state that said we couldn't pass an ordinance because we were starting, I was getting phone calls from people who said we don't want the data center in Little Rock. And we passed an ordinance to say that there will be no data center developments in Little Rock. I asked a question to our city attorney, said we can't do that. Pastor Mary said this act by the state supersedes local authorities' powers to say they don't want data centers. So if we're going to have this thing, then the least we can do is try to put in some restrictions about it, where it goes, noise, water, all these things. And I think Mayor Scott did a great job with that. At least 6 members of the city board signed off on that. I was one of them. If we have got to have this thing, let's try to put some boundaries around it. Let's try to put some restrictions around it. Because I can tell you, I've talked to people that I represent who, they don't want a data center, period. They just don't want one. There's nothing you can say, there's nothing you can do that's going to convince them that we should have a data center. Data centers are bad, they shouldn't be developed anywhere in the world. I understand that. But I got to deal in the realities of what the law says. And so we're doing our best, as you said, President Wells, to try to put some parameters in place. The parameters that we put in place is a first shot. I've been on the board since October 21 when Ms. Hendricks died, and I ran for the office of 22 and got elected. It's been numerous times when we've come back and made amendments to different ordinances based on what we've learned in the future. I fully expect, without a doubt in my mind, that once we see how these things begin to operate, that we will probably come back, that we will come back and maybe make some amendments to this ordinance that's putting in place this basic set of restrictions or rules in which this thing is going to be developed. I fully expect that. We don't have all the information now. And people talk about, well, shouldn't Google have all the information? Maybe they should, but I don't know if the whole process works the way that we think it should work. I'm going to try to break this down in a very simple example in my mind, and it's probably not a real good example, but I'm going to use it anyway. I bought a lot in downtown Little Rock. It was in the capital zoning district. I just bought the lot because I said, I'm going to build a house on this lot. I know it has water, I know it has electricity, I know it has all these things. If somebody would come to me and say, well, how many bricks are you going to put up? I don't know yet. What are you going to do with it? I don't know yet. I have not drawn up any plans. I don't know what this house is going to look like. I don't know if I'm going to put a sprinkler system. I don't know all that. You're asking me questions that I can't answer. But I'm going to build a house on it. I know that much. I'm going to have to go through permits. I had to get permits and drawings and things approved by capital zoning because I was in the capital zoning district. And now I had to go back and tweak some things because it didn't fit with their regulations. I had to get permits from the city. I had to do all of it. I couldn't tell you what kind of house I was going to build because you were asking me things that I have not come up with. But I was going to build a house. And so there is a process that Google's going through to try to involve everyone to try to get permits. I've heard, so I think it's kind of interesting that we call some of these meetings that Google has secret meetings. I was asked as a director, can you pick 3 people that you think would like to go to a meeting, a public meeting? This is the first of a public meeting we're going to have. I said yes. Okay, I'm going to ask Captain Wells. I'm going to ask Graham Cabinet. I'm going to ask State Representative Joy Springer if they would go to these meetings. And if they have more meetings, people ask me, I'm going to pick some other people who say they want to get involved or people that are involved. These weren't no secret meetings. These meetings happen. I'll tell you what the secret meeting was. A secret meeting earlier this week was when Google called Judge Griffith, and they had a meeting at Graham Caplet's office with Judge Griffith, his campaign manager, and Graham Caplet. That was a secret meeting. So when you use the definition of a secret meeting, that was a secret meeting. You wasn't invited to that. I didn't know anything about that. But the meeting, this public meeting, was no secret meeting. I guess it sounds good in the paper. I guess it sounds good like that, but they're going to have more meetings. And so I'm not a Google expert. I wasn't for or against the data centers. I'm learning just as much as you guys are at this point. If I had a preference, I wouldn't want a data center in Little Rock. If I had a preference, if I could stop it. But I deal with reality.
I just have to step in. This idea of secret meetings is, I think it's really important to understand that the public and their elected officials are one entity. That is the public, right? It includes both
citizenry and it includes public officials. A public meeting is one that exists between that group and within that group where there's a free exchange of information. The reason it's being called a secret meeting is because not everyone in the public was invited to attend, and our representatives weren't there representing us. So there was no one in the room who was under any obligation to represent the general public. They were all, hopefully they did, I mean, I know people like Kathy attempt to represent the groups that they're with, but there was no obligation to do so. So it's called a secret meeting because the public has been asking for public opportunity to comment and to be part of the process, and they've been shut out of that. So to have a meeting that is controlled by the vendor, that is controlled by the big money piece of it, right, is very disconcerting to a lot of people. I think the other thing in your example of your house, while that is very valid, you're one little guy, right, dealing in the city permitting process. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar company, right? That's conflating. That's not the same thing. That's
Well, I said I was using that example. I
yeah,
didn't say,
no, I'm just saying.
I qualified what I was saying, right?
And I agree. I just want to point out that I think one of the things that's really important, and this is why we're glad you're here, because it's important that the exchange is happening between government agencies, which is part of the public, a public official, members of the citizenry. When I look around the room, I see people who belong to multiple organizations. You know, this is public. This is good. This is really good.
So the meeting that Google had earlier this week with 3 people, that was a secret meeting, right?
Yes, that was a PR meeting. That was a PR.
Oh, was that? So the meeting that First United Methodist, that was a PR meeting too, right?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make sure, when you started talking, it sounded like you guys all agreed to invite Google in, not knowing what their purpose was. Is that correct?
We didn't have. When we signed that memorandum of understanding for Willow, and whoever the representative was, we didn't really have all the information that we probably
So you talked before you leave?
We didn't ask enough questions. I would say I didn't ask enough questions.
So you're going to do different in the future?
Oh, absolutely. I'm talking with some of our members of the board, and they say, Virgil, that will never happen again. We have to ask more questions.
Yes, essentially you've reached something that, from everything I've heard, is not good for the environment. And you said, okay, this is somebody coming. Okay.
Well, we know about the environment things, but obviously when we agree to let the port buy property, Echo Pack, and all the rest of these different industries in the port, probably don't have all the information about that either, but we trust about economic development. We just didn't ask enough questions. I can speak for myself. I didn't ask enough questions. I know some other board members that they looking back on and said they didn't ask enough questions. So I will take that bullet.
Well, let's circle back to one more. I just need to make a point of information here. You really didn't have the option to vote no under state law. So whether you knew everything or half of it or the very little amount that cares.
Well, with clarification of this, why would they have the right?
Because state law passed in 23 says you cannot refuse a data center.
Is that not
But
once
none
they're
of that's
invited?
mandated.
Is that not once they're invited in?
We're talking before.
Well, they invited them in, but
Right.
basically they can't say
But if they
no.
had said no,
But they
they would never
They didn't say,
start.
they didn't say yes. They didn't know about the data center the way you're talking. You didn't know about the data center.
All of the
Yes.
details.
Virgil, did you have the option to say no legally?
You know, you can always vote no, but then you can be faced with a lawsuit too.
Well,
Are we
actually,
saying
let's
that-
let it go.
are we saying that once a data center wants to be somewhere, the community cannot deny it?
Yes, that is what the 23 law does. It takes all of the control out of the cities, out of the
I thought
counties.
it's once they're allowed to come in, you can't make changes or
No, no,
deny
no,
it.
no, 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 no.
Well,
The state says, come on. We have preempted every other authority in the state of Arkansas.
Okay.
If they want to come in, they gotta be
So
allowed
what
to
are
come
they
in.
agreeing to?
That law is also about crypto mining.
Yeah, it is, but let's not go there.
Well, it wasn't specifically to data centers. It was a broader.
It's treated as that by the city attorney because it's named in the law. So that's where I understand this goes. So let's be a little bit careful about saying yes and saying no and knowing enough to say yes or say no. I'm subject to correction on that, Virgil, but as I understand it, the way the city attorney kept talking about 23, you all couldn't have said anything but yes. And the question then becomes, maybe under your authority that you do retain about zoning, you can tell them you gotta be here, you can't be there. It's just like the proverbial very old example about if you want that slaughterhouse put in a place away from your house and your residence, in your grocery store, you have zoning that lets it go here, not there. So that much control they had, and that much they've exercised.
I guess what's
I might
concerning-
point out that it took you a year to do zoning on a brand new, large category of industry that you had officially voted in. And it would have been nice if the city staff had been preparing an ordinance promptly thereafter, like in May of 25, instead of a year later. That really is a demerit for the city staff, I'm sorry.
Kathy,
Yes,
may I ask you a question of Mr. Benefield? May I ask a question,
Please
Mr.
do.
Benefield? Well, I was waiting for permission. You're an engineer, I take it?
I am.
Okay, you're not a lawyer, not a member of the board of directors, not a businessman, you're an engineer. Okay. You're here, I understand, to talk about process regarding wastewater or facilities or a plan for wastewater in this project. Is that why you're here?
That's correct.
All right. Indulge me just a minute as an engineer. Okay. Do you know how wide the locks are on the Panama Canal?
I don't.
You don't, because I looked it up, 110 feet. Assuming that information is correct, then if you're an engineer designing a ship, a vessel to go through the Panama Canal, it can be no wider than the locks are. Would that seem engineered to make engineering sense?
Yes.
Okay. Let's take aircraft carriers. There are classes of aircraft carriers. You build one. One assumes you use the same plants to build the next 3 or 4 of those multi-billion-dollar projects, right? How many data centers, do you have any idea how many data centers Google may have developed and built in the U.S.?
I don't know.
Okay. What are water treatment plants, okay? How many varieties do they come in?
Of wastewater treatment plants?
Yes, sir.
Oh, gosh, there's quite a few.
Well, I mean, is
Different types.
that 3 or 4 or 5 or 6?
Oh, gosh, I wouldn't even know, because there are a bunch of very types that have been used very little. There's, I would say several, 2 or 3 major, well,
Okay.
small, so 5 major versions.
Oh, okay. So there are packages. One would assume that for maybe certain types of sites, site requirements be one thing. Now, I'm not an engineer. What I'm trying to say, all right, okay. How many major grocery store chains do you think there are by now? Not very many, are there?
Yeah.
Okay. So, or McDonald's or whatever. Does the facility look like it probably comes in a standard architectural and engineering design package? Okay. Do you think Google would have bought the land and planned to put a data center on this site at the port and not know what they were gonna put there. We're just gonna buy some land and then we'll figure it out. I'm not trying to be snarky here, but they're smart folks, aren't they?
Yeah, I have no idea what their processes are or what they do. I do know this.
And they haven't explained it yet, have they?
The one thing I will say is that the one thing we can all, which is good or bad, how you would take this is, it's changing daily, right? The processes are changing and what's happening. We just talked about a minute ago, data centers in space. Things are changing quickly. There are different options, I think, for any data center. I mean, even though we're not involved in the Avea one, there's some different things they're talking about in that one, I understand, than this one. So I think there are options related to data centers. Obviously, they have changed some things at this site because they're changing their core permit. These are things outside of wastewater.
I understand.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? They've
Right.
already changed some things in how they're going to address wetlands on site by the change of the permit. So I understand what you're saying, but I think that they probably had an idea what they would like to do. But I do think as an engineer, there's usually more than one way to do it. Yeah.
Some high federal officials have called maybe their idea of concept. It could be as vague as that. From where you stand, you deal with one part of it.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and what we're looking at is, and I will tell you, where we approached it is, if they had said they were only going to build one building, we would have looked at the whole site anyway. Because we're going to plan farther out than just the initial. That's why we did our study the way we did.
Do you have any information to indicate that building 2, 3, 4, or 5 will be different from building 1 in any material sense? Or copycat?
I have no.
Don't know.
Yeah.
All right. A person who apparently has written about being at the church meeting says, I felt like Google was here in good faith to talk to folks, and I do think they are so early in the process. He's interested in potential water use, and he said he hoped Google would release a timeline for the data center. Would you think a company like Google building a project this big would at least have a timeline for what they're going to do?
My only answer to that is I know they mentioned that I was at the city board meeting, 18 months is what they anticipate before they could get core approval and I think, being engineer, done things other than wastewater in my career, you really need to know what you're going to be able to do as far as that goes before you can finalize a site plan. And my understanding is they're trying to reconfigure to minimize wetland impacts. But ultimately looking at what the Corps is going to require as far as wetland impacts would probably be a decider on what they're going to do total.
And did I hear you say earlier that you're not aware in your agency of there being any applications for permits for the Google project yet?
Oh, no, I didn't say that. I don't know what they've done. There's no permit. They haven't applied for a pretreatment permit because you can't really do that till you get closer to being operational. We've only done the preliminary concept level look at wastewater in general. So.
In effect, are you saying that based on the Corps of Engineers permit that there's a 12 or 18-month moratorium in place in effect because of the need for that Corps permit?
I think that would be a misstatement from what they told us Wednesday. They're doing a whole lot of looking at this and that and the other thing, but that is one of those decision go, no go, go this way and not that way at the intersection. So only after that is in place will they then take the next step and the next step and the next step. As far as they've not filed for permits, that is absolutely the first one from everything they're telling us, and they're going to be a while getting to any city permit requirement. And please keep in mind on that before the city passed the mayor's ordinance, which I'm glad to hear you're open to revisions, and we need to open a file, and we need to get the email address that we can start suggesting amendments, please, sir. I've asked for that from Brad Jordan, the city planning director. It's not replied to me yet. So you might persuade him to work on that sooner rather than later. But coming back to your comment, they've got to meet 14 different standards of safety for a heavy industry going into that zone of the city of Little Rock, because Tim Whitener, the building permit supervisor, who says, go, no go, is going to be taking a piece of paper one day at some point in the future that says, we want to build this here. And he's going to go right down his list, just like we've been looking at lists today. And he's going to say, have you met the regulation for 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 14? And we were very reassured that even though we didn't have zoning at that time, we had some regulatory authority that was going to keep us safe and was going to prevent the bad stuff and assert the good stuff, just to sum it up in simple terms. Then,
May I
within
ask
a couple of weeks, by golly, we had a proposal from the mayor, and he whipped it right through, and he didn't even let the Sustainability Commission of the city time to weigh in on it,
May I
which is
ask, may I ask,
merit to the city.
may I ask Councilman Miller a question?
Please.
Virgil, when you get an opportunity, if you feel comfortable or free or that it's a relevant question, would you ask those that you think should know if Google has ever, one, who builds Google's facilities? Do they hire a general contractor? And if so, could they tell us who it is? And two, how many of them have they built across the country? I'm just trying to figure out if this is their first rodeo, which is not believable.
We were introduced Wednesday to the guy whose job it is to get that construction going. And we didn't hear about any subcontractors, the outsiders. What we did hear was his many years on the job doing this. So this is not his first rodeo.
All right.
And the next thing was, I was asking about where they would be sleeping at night. Because we knew in general news it was going to be a workforce of hundreds coming into this large site, building this large facility. And he comes back at me with, oh no, it's going to be thousands. I said, okay, and where are they going to sleep at night? And he acknowledged that was a challenge that he had yet to meet. And in fact, at the West Memphis facility, a few months ahead of us, it's really tough for him to find places for his workers to lodge at night. So I made a few suggestions.
Don't you want those to be local workers?
My impression is they have a trained crew. As you said, they have models and some standards that they meet within their video choices. And so they have a crew that moves from this address to this address to this address to this address.
That ends up creating the fallacy of economic development. Because the money that's being paid during that process doesn't stay in the local community, right?
Well, it does if they sleep here and eat here and live here.
If they live here, yes, completely agree. But if they're only here doing that job, they're not spending the money here. The money is in their resident. To some degree, not the same as in
I'm trying to stay out of politics and economic benefit and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I do, but you do know they have a website, littlerockdatacenter.com, and they are welcoming all questions. So Stark, I would definitely say we can make
And
sure
I posted
that they want all questions. The questions that you're asking me, please send them to that site.
I'm gonna send it to you.
Go, and I'll get it to the site.
See, I think it will be a weightier question for them if they hear it from one of the deciders. This nice lady here told me she just checked on AI and got an answer that Google has 22 data centers operational. She's not even referring to it.
Mrs. Clark talking.
So, that would be our guess, that this is not their first data center. They know how to do it.
And I would say of those 22 data centers, and I don't know, it's just, I'm talking, I know they got a Google spreadsheet for time. It's Google spreadsheet, right? They got to have something, that boxes they can check. I don't think all data centers are alike. I would say of the 22 they properly developed, they may they could possibly have 22 different designs. Could. So I think everything is unique. I think everything is custom. And I believe we have an obligation and a responsibility as a community to say what we want to have this data center look like if it's going to be forced on us. We have to have that. And so there is a process in place that's going to take probably 18 to 24 months before this thing's even built. So I think there is plenty of time along the way for public input. I believe that we have an obligation to go on that website. They asked us to submit questions. If we don't submit questions, then shame on us for not doing that. But we have a chance to put our fingerprints on this by getting involved in this process, and what's going on now is part of that. And these secret meetings that the public, with invitation only, this is an invitation only meeting. This is an invitation only meeting, not a public meeting. But they're going to be having a bunch of meetings. And you can probably tell them, look, we want to have an open town hall meeting. I don't think they would object to that. But certainly they're going to have probably some kind of rules as to how they can, have this thing in a manner in which everybody can be heard and, it doesn't get out of hand. So I think they're experimenting initially with invitation-only meetings. I didn't pick people from the chamber. I didn't ask people who had already signed off on that. I didn't ask utility executives. I asked somebody that I knew was going to ask some questions. All right? I asked somebody that has weighed in on this thing with public comments on their social media page. I asked a state representative who would have knowledge of Act 851. So they're going to have more meetings. They're going to ask more people. And so I want to make sure that I'm identifying people who have interest, who would like to go to the meeting. If they ask me for 3 more people, I got some people in mind right now that I'm looking at that probably need to be invited to some of those meetings. I think there's plenty of time for this. Again, what happened in April of 25 when we signed that memorandum of understanding, like we do for so many businesses, that chamber comes in, a report comes in, man, we need to buy some land, we got this great business coming in. Yeah, that sounds great. We didn't ask enough questions. I will be the first to admit that it will not happen again. I got board members who sit on my right and on my left at board meetings every Wednesday who are saying, Bert, we didn't ask enough questions. So I'll take that hit, and I will readily admit it, but it won't happen.
And we're looking for the board to conduct a public discussion. It's one thing for Google to do it, but that is a particular viewpoint and press in a particular direction. The y'all come and y'all talk invitation that we heard described today is something the board and the city hall officials need to give us. We've asked for that for a couple months now, and we haven't got it, so we're asking for it again.
I would
And
say
now we have
we
a question over here.
soothe that wound, the shock, and if you all would extend that olive branch to the community and say, you know what, we made a mistake here, we're going to open this up. Rebuild that trust.
I have no problem with that.
And who has the yes or no vote?
Well, for what?
To allow the data center in. 23, the state legislature made that decision. Period.
You said when they say they want to come in, you got to let them in. Is that act totally that nobody in the state says no?
That's right. State legislature created it and said, we decided they can come. You can't stop them.
You can Google it, Act 851 of 2023.
You can Google it.
That's the same law. No loophole. I'm sorry, you got
No
one.
loopholes, state law.
Okay, guys, we can't hear. What?
I just wondering, there's no loopholes on this thing. It's a state law saying if the data center wants to come in, they can.
Nope. Now, we had a question.
For my own edification, was it that the board back in April voted to sell the land before because it was to Willowbend, it wasn't to Google at the time, right? Was it to sell them the land before they knew it was gonna be a data center, or did they sell it knowing it was gonna be a data center?
We had information that it was gonna be a data center. That information was in there, but just like everybody in here, I'm learning more about data centers every day. And so there probably should have been more questions asked about it. But no, we knew they had given us information about this. They were saying, oh man, this is good, this is great, it's a $1 billion industry, it's going to be great for the city. But no, we had the basic skeleton framework of what.
So Google and the Chamber of
Well,
Commerce.
it wasn't Google, Willowbend, whoever.
Willowbend, but they basically, the Chamber of Commerce, the people that gave you the deal, that showed you, hey, this deal's coming, basically knew about Act 851, and then like Patty says, they were, once you sold it, them to the land to them as a data center, there's nothing we can do from there. That's the whole thing comes down to transparency, right? In my opinion, it was a secret meeting, because there was no press in there, there was no public, right now, there's a camera right there, there's CHP 11, there was Channel 7 over there, there's people here trying to group up and talk about this. So I think, in my opinion, it was a secret meeting. And when I went over there to ask questions, see, hey, what's going on with this and that, they were like as PR as they could be. They're like, they couldn't answer any questions. Just please sit down and be with you. And then, like at the last 10 minutes of the supposed open meeting that they were going to have, all they did was introduce themselves and then say, "Oh, we got to wrap it up. We have 1 minute left in this venue." That it just comes down to that whole thing right now. We weren't in the conversation back in April last year. You guys had a whole year to investigate what's going on with this thing. And then we don't even know it was Google until January when the press actually found out who the heck is running the data center. So,
one point of information, in April 29 or 25, at the special meeting of the city board, it was announced in normal, regular fashion. I attended, and I watched this mutter mumble go on, and I have procured the actual record of the minutes just to back up my recollection that it was unanimous voice vote of all present to do this deal. So it was recorded. If you go onto the city website, like there are other meetings, it's on video. The minutes are available. I've got a copy. I posted this to my network. So it wasn't secret in that sense when they made the purchase. What was occurring was nobody talked. Nobody gave any description, and nobody raised any questions. It was all in favor of this proposal for the special meeting. Aye. And I don't think it lasted 30 minutes.
And all three all the ordinances and resolutions were read together and voted on together as opposed to separately as well.
It was a concept.
Kathy,
Yes.
I'd like to share a comment from online from a Hanger Hill resident. Thank you for making this public. Google's method of people going online and asking the questions does not make those questions that have been asked public. So repeated questions are not asked.
That's very true, which is another good reason for the city hall to sponsor that kind of forum where we know we are heard and we maybe get a sense at the people who attend about the particulars they're concerned about. One thing about submitting questions is you don't know what they do with them. One of the nice things about me meeting with them face-to-face was I was talking with the engineer who's going to run the construction crew. I was talking with the engineer who was responsible for water. I had the ability to find, in my own view, these were mature professionals who had done this work for years. That was how they introduced themselves. So we had the sense they knew what they were doing, but we also got the sense that there are many options off the menu of possibles that they're going to work through, and it's after they take the soil samples, after they get the wetlands permit. There is this timeline which is going to take them through one through X steps to get to the final one. And if you look at the addresses of all the data centers they've got around the country, I haven't done that. but some indications I've seen in the news are they are in very different places where there may be not abundant water, but drought. That's where air cooled becomes a really important feature. If they're gonna put one there for business purposes, they can't take the water, so they're gonna get their cooling for their service another way, and so forth and so on. So we've learned that much about variation as possible. Yes?
I just want to add that just because Act 851 was passed by our state legislature and is on the books, doesn't mean that we're powerless against that. Right here in Arkansas, we have the right to petition, we have the right to initiate acts, we have the right to referendums, we have the right to constitutional amendments.
Absolutely.
So we have the opportunity to change that should we decide that we want to. And number two is that we also have the right to elect different state representatives. And the state legislature has the right to change that law in. So I just don't want us to lose sight of the fact that Act 851 is not written in concrete, but it is something that we have the opportunity to continue to react against, the same as we do with ordinances. So we just shouldn't give up and say, well, that we can't do anything about that piece, because we can't.
But that's true, and that's another discussion. I think what's very assuring about the word from Mr. Benefield about our sewer utility is that we already have, thank you, Virgil.
Thank you. I'm going to the Solar Pride Parade. Starts at noon.
Is that we already have in place for any industry that applies to this super large one. We're wondering about, can we govern this super large facility? And the answer is yes, we can from the water standpoint. Yes, we can from the sewer utility treatment standpoint. They are well in place. They do these policies. They have staff trained to test this and check that and perform their functions. And once again, Mr. Whitener came to this group and was very reassuring about what's required before any building permit is issued to these folks to run the first bulldozer over the dirt out there. The fact that we then belatedly whipped up an ordinance adds to it, but I'm guessing it doesn't materially or substantially change or add to the protections the public is going to benefit from. That's just my speculation.
Just want to mention too, so from Little Rock standpoint, if you have any questions on my cards here, it's my cell phone, my email, Kathy and I talk routinely. We want you to get any wastewater related questions you have answered. I hope you would agree I answered all the questions, and we'll continue if something comes up after this. And as far as wastewater are now, Kathy sometimes asks me questions that aren't wastewater, and I have to tell her I'm not, I can't answer questions regarding non-wastewater items. It's just not our area of expertise. But I want anyone who wants to get a card, and like I said, you can get directly to me and get your questions answered regarding wastewater, because this is a starting process. There'll be more permits and things we'll have to do. We're only at the beginning of permitting this industry, and it'll be our first large data center ourselves. So there may be other questions that come up, and we want you to have that ability.
In the event that you go traveling to find out what they're doing, not only in West Memphis, but other functioning data centers, and you create a report like your board, we would be grateful if you'd share that with us. We found this about that.
Okay, yeah, and then I will tell you, and we're definitely out, any document that's been requested, and we'll try to, I think these documents will be posted out in the future now. Anything we have, we're pretty much subject to, anything we have is subject to FOIA. So even with an NDA, you'll notice that
we have the NDA, thanks to my FOIA request.
Every NDA we add a statement in here that says, except as we're subject to FOIA. So which really means that there's very few things like true confidential business secrets that FOIA doesn't allow us to release. So we never sign one that does not have a statement in here that we add, our attorney adds every single time that says, except where we're required to release for FOIA. So if you ever have a question about what's going on, you can get us. Now, it's important for us to get information from these industries so we can do the work we've done. You don't want us to not know what's coming because we want to plan years in advance.
You got that right.
Yeah, but I want it to be stated, Kathy has FOIA'd us, we've had some other FOIAs, and I think we've released 100% of every document that we've been asked for without redaction. If that's, so
I've heard nothing to the contrary.
yeah, so I mean, I just want you to know where we're at on that regard, is like I said, we are subject to FOIA, and we would never sign an NDA that did not acknowledge that we cannot hold something back that we're required by law to release.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? We're coming to the end of our period.
I have one other that I think we were going to begin to answer but didn't quite get to it. All the evaporation. Is there pollutants in the evaporation or is that just pure water?
That's just steam. That's, you know, I'm not an expert on evaporation. That would be subject to the air permit, but my understanding, I mean, there's cooling waters all across the town. Cooling towers.
Yeah, yeah.
The hospitals all have cooling towers.
Right.
And so this material is usually just clean steam but I'm not an expert, I'm just trying to answer your question.
Yeah.
If that's not true, please don't come back on me with the video and say, because I'm not a steam expert.
Gotcha.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you.